One of his core priorities is to make science actually applicable and understandable to us, the end user, the farmer, the rancher, and the consumer. And that's what he sets about to do every day of his life. Jonathan is equal parts encouraging, entertaining, hilarious, and educational. Jonathan, welcome.
Today I want to tell a story. I want to tell a story about this. Why isn't regenerative agriculture mainstream? Just from a scientist's perspective, okay? So bear with me. I will put a little bit of data up first thing in the talk just to kind of drive this whole thing going. All right. What a beautiful place, right? Just the right distance from the sun. Just the right content of minerals in the earth in order to keep it at just the right temperature. A slight wobble to give us the seasons. But we're facing some serious problems on this beautiful, beautiful planet of ours. Climate change. We have all heard these issues, right? They've all been carted out there. Human health. I currently have 6 nieces and nephews that are severely autistic. Is that normal? No. Cancer, food allergies, intolerances to our food? Really? Pollution is rampant on this planet. Civil unrest. Starving people get upset, don't they? And declines in biodiversity. Science is now linking all of these issues convincingly to how we are producing our food. Not that we are producing our food, but how we are producing our food. What is one of the central causes behind these major planetary shifts that we are starting to see? Well, there it is. Agriculture has become far too simplified. Large monoculture. Somewhere down the road, farmers convinced themselves that to be a good farmer, I've got to farm bigger and simpler. I've got to farm more acres. I've got to scoop up as much land as I can. And the only way I can manage that is by reducing the number of species that I'm producing. And the whole system spiraled into this monolith that we don't know how to extract ourselves from. This is one of my graduate students, Claire. She just got her master's degree and is now working at the University of Minnesota. If you any Minnesotans out there? Yeah, give Claire a call. She's brilliant. What she did for her master's project should have earned her like 3 PhDs as far as I'm concerned. She decided that instead of being a scientist that goes out onto a research farm and decides best management practices you've got to do for a regenerative farmer, for a sustainable farmer, you've got to do this, 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 and this. And then put them out onto this research farm in small plots where we can control every little aspect of it. Claire decided, you know what, there's some really good farmers out there that have been doing this for years. Why don't we take a step back and decide that they know what they're talking about and study what they're doing on their own farms? So she went out and she found some of the best management practices, some of the top regenerative farmers in North Dakota, South Dakota, Nebraska, and Minnesota. And we sampled these different farms, these cornfields, okay? There was a regional focus. This was systems level. And then we went out there, after we sampled the hell out of these things, we said, point us to your neighbor who's doing things right conventionally. And we went out onto those cornfields and we sampled the heck out of those. So these two treatments suddenly are unified, not by individual practices, but by the principles that drive them, all right? But two practices that were consistent on each of these different fields were that there was absolutely no insecticides used on the regenerative fields, these cornfields, and all of the conventional cornfields were BT corn and treated with neonicotinoid seed treatments. You guys know neonics? You're going to hear a lot about these things, okay? Neonicotinoids are a seed treatment that's on just about every acre of corn in the US right now. On one corn seed, there's enough insecticide to kill 360,000 bees. Your corn is not normally red, pink, purple, blue, okay? Those are insecticides. And as that plant develops, it transports a small amount of the insecticide into the plant to protect it from quote-unquote early season herbivory. 80 to 98% of that insecticide goes into the environment, into the soil, into the water, okay? So all of these had neonicotinoids and were BT corn varieties, okay? Then we went out into each of these cornfields and we grabbed corn plants out of the field and we counted all of the insect life on those corn plants. And then we got down on our hands and knees and we put these quadrats out and we started sucking up bugs off of the soil surface. And then we took golf cup cutters and we drilled down into the soil and we brought these soil cores back to the lab where we extracted all of the insect life that was living in the soil column. And we did a full bioinventory of dozens of farms. And then we looked at the yields and the profits from each of these cornfields. And this is what we found. The insecticide-treated cornfields had 10 times more insect pests than the fields that had never seen insecticides. That's not supposed to happen, right? That's not supposed to happen. Because the regenerative corn farmers did not simply abandon insecticides, did they? They replaced agrochemical usage with biology, with plants, with cover crops, with diverse rotations. But this isn't supposed to happen, right? As an entomologist in graduate school, I was taught, okay, you wait. All right, you go out there and you observe your cornfield. And then only look at 1 or 2 different insects in there because those are the bad ones. And you wait and you watch them and you wait and you count them frequently and they keep on growing and they keep on growing in abundance. And then they hit a certain level and then you react. Ha ha, we got them. You buy a jug and you spray it out there. What this study shows is that the farmers who are designing a resilient system don't have to worry about that. They don't have to spend more money on a jug. Yields were significantly reduced by about 25, 29%, right in there. But the regenerative farmers were twice as profitable. Why the hell do we give prizes annually to the guy who grows the most corn yield per acre? Why do we have yield contests? A well-trained monkey can grow 300 bushel corn, all right? If they buy enough jugs. We should be doing this on profit. Because what we found that was so striking about this study is that when we looked at yields related to profit, they were uncorrelated. You don't want to know what profit in each of these dots is a cornfield. You want to know where the profit was correlated to? The amount of organic matter in the soil. Why don't we give prizes for that? State prize for the guys or girls Who grew the most soil last year? That would push us so much farther forward than who grew the greatest yield. The data was sound. The data was consistent. And within one day, not many master's students can say this, within one day, Claire's paper reached the 99th percentile in terms of all science ever published in terms of social media impact. And it's on food. I mean, normally it's on like microbiology or medicine or something like this, right? The time is right. People are wanting this. So this paper hasn't achieved some huge impact factor, or it wasn't published in the highest tier journal. You want to know who we were marketing to? Farmers. Most of those journals are behind some firewall so that you can't access them for less than $29.95, right? We want this science to hit the people that need it. If the data is there, if the farmers are doing this, if the ranchers are doing this, why isn't this mainstream? What we're talking about is a paradigm shift in how we produce food and how we think about food, all right? And paradigm shifts, number one, do not come from the government, do they? Throughout, I mean, this isn't my opinion, this is throughout human history. When you look at a paradigm shift, where does it come from? It doesn't come from large universities, these places have a role to play. But paradigm shifts come from the bottom up. They come from people like you in this room. And number two reason, and maybe this is, somewhat self-serving, but I believe that one of the reasons that regenerative farming isn't mainstream is that the science on this is either misdirected or manipulated. We're going to talk a little bit more about that. My kids and I were watching Cosmo. Have you guys seen that? With Neil deGrasse Tyson, the guy with the hair. It goes through the history of science. And every episode is about, a certain scientific advance, and, so-and-so, he discovered that light refracts in just a certain different way, and it was really revolutionary in how we design telescopes and understand the universe, and so they cut off his hands and they burned him at the stake. Like every single episode, right, it deals with it. And the kids are looking at me like, what the hell is going on? This is science, you guys. I mean, throughout human history, Copernicus, Galileo were both chastised, almost killed, for discovering new truths about the universe. Alfred Wegener had this crazy idea that the continents are on these plates and they shift around and move. Get rid of this fella. Barbara McClintock had the audacity to be a female scientist, number one, crazy. But then she discovered that genes don't stay put, they jump around, and she was ostracized by the entire genetics community for years. For years. They literally cut Alan Turing's balls off for discovering computers. And Lynn Margulis discovered a whole new realm of evolution that for decades she fought tooth and nail to get this idea that organisms are not necessarily an entity in and of themselves, that symbioses drive evolutionary processes. So it's humbling for me as a scientist to say this. I got into science originally because I was interested in truth. I wanted to understand the world around me. I was looking for something bigger, okay? And science offers a framework for trying to assess the world around us, but science does not offer proof. That's math. Science can give you understanding, but only if you understand the constraints and how to use it. So science is not black and white. Science is gray, all right? A very important point. Because science is manipulated. It was formalized not so long ago, especially by the tobacco industry. You can look into this. There's a really good video on Netflix called Merchants of Doubt about Naomi Oreskes' really fantastic book on this topic. But how the hell did the tobacco industry convince us for decades that these little cigarettes had no human health problems? How did they do that? My dad still is not convinced. He's a smoker. Well, there's a formula. When you find a study that shows something that is not in your favor, you know what? Science is not black and white. Science is gray. And there is no perfect scientific study that has ever been conducted. And so all you have to do is pick holes in it, okay? All you have to do is criticize it. And suddenly that science doesn't seem so good anymore. All right, you've got a threat. Okay, so if we have this issue where science is not black and white, science is gray, how do we make a decision based on science? You repeat the same study or similar studies in different contexts over and over again. And suddenly you rely on a preponderance of evidence to decide whether something is true or not true. How do you get a preponderance of evidence? You buy it. You buy it. Science is for sale. I hate to say it, but that's true. And who have the deepest pockets? Well, we can go on into that for some time, couldn't we? All right, so you've got this situation on your hands. You've got a wonderful new product that may have some environmental effects, but it's going to make you boatloads of money. All right, you've already discredited that study that just came out, and you funded everybody else, a bunch of scientists that are kind of in your pocket anyways, and they showed that that your product is great. But you've still got this noisy guy or gal out there that keeps on harping on this issue. So what do? You destroy that person. You destroy that scientist. You eviscerate them publicly as noisily as you can. You kill them. You destroy their family. You destroy everybody that they care about. And nobody else steps forward again. And that, folks, is science. Why do we seem to think that we have no effect on pollinators? I was just at a monarch summit, and there was a lot of discussion about habitat. God, we're going to plant, a gazillion stems of milkweed out there. And the monarch butterflies just need habitat. And there was a couple of people in the room that raised their hands and said, you know what, insecticides kill monarchs, and we have a lot of insecticides out there. And instantly, there was representative plants in the room that shot up and said, no, that science is not black and white. That science is gray. It's inconclusive. And at the end of the Monarch Summit, it was concluded that we should focus on habitat, right? Bees are dying. But gosh, it's just so gray. What could be killing them? The neonicotinoids, I mean, gosh, you're right. There was that one study, but, we found some holes in that study that said that the neonics weren't killing them. And then we've got all these other pieces of work that says there's no effect. So neonics, we should definitely not make any hard, fast decisions here that insecticides might be killing these bees. There is just a crushing amount of evidence at this point that neonics affect just about every life history parameter of the honeybee adversely. All right? Science is manipulated. And as a result, on a federal level, we have special summits for forage, we have special summits for the varroa mite, new diseases, and suddenly that one that was going to work on pesticides just got forgotten about. There is no incentive for a scientist to address these controversial issues. Why would a scientist choose to flush their career down the tubes for this, right? When there's so many lady beetles out there that have spots that need to be counted. I mean, I could spend a career on that, right? And many do. And that's not to say that that's not important, but at the same time, I think scientists need to understand why they're choosing to select certain areas. And we need boldness, and we need courage to address some of these hard issues. Applied scientists, why would they cut off their funding stream? Where does the money come for most applied research these days? Industry does. That's right. Where does all of the money come from for risk assessment of pesticides? It's from the companies that are registering them. And finally, science is necessary. We have to have data to drive our decision making. But at the same time, it is totally insufficient for changing behavior. And this is also a very humbling fact, okay? We are not a data-driven society. Arguably, we are becoming less of a data-driven society, all right? We seem to be relying more and more on tweets and Facebook messaging than on hard data in deciding what we're doing out there, okay? And so scientists need to be much more nowadays than simply people that generate numbers. We need to be communicators. We need to be educators of the people who need that data the most. We can't just teach our students to communicate science to other scientists, which is what's been happening for generations. Look at that guy. God, what a good-looking fella. I've deteriorated a lot. So, on a personal level, yes, I worked for USDA for 11 years for Ag Research Service, and I was good. I played by the rules. I did everything right. All of those metrics that scientists are evaluated on, I mean, students and postdocs up the yin-yang. We had a great laboratory team that was built up. Publications, more than 100 peer-reviewed papers. Some scientists never achieved that in their entire careers. Grants, millions in grants. They just kept on rolling in. It was crazy. Federal advisory positions, not just in the US, but also I was advising the Brazilian government and the European Food Safety Authority and risk assessment. I got to meet the president in the White House for being one of the top young scientists in the country. My impact factor was exquisite. I was doing everything right. And then I met these jerks. And what these farmers and these ranchers told me, because all of my career was based on the current paradigm, making the paradigm work. When you see a pest, you strut around it a little bit and you watch it, and then you react. And what these guys and ladies were doing on their farms is they were telling me that they hadn't used pesticides in decades, that they didn't need to. And it wasn't an ideological decision. It was because it was a good business decision. Why would I spend money on an extra $100 to $200 a bag for my corn seed when it wasn't doing anything for me? Right? And then I met these folks. And the beekeepers were saying to me, the pesticides are killing our bees, but the data is gray and nobody's listening. And we're being told by the feds that, I mean, they're putting out all kinds of pamphlets that says they love bees, but when we tell them that we have a bee die-off, and then we send our samples out west or out east to get them analyzed at the federal lab, and they come back negative when we're watching the bees die in front of us during a planting event. And then we started to hold back some of our bees, and we sent them to an independent analysis lab, and they all came back positive. And something wasn't right. Something wasn't right. So after 15 years working in professional science, and I think that this is as true today as it was then, some conclusions that I had to start drawing as we started to devote our science to validating what the ranchers and farmers who were really innovating our food system were doing, and validating what the beekeepers were saying about the environmental pollution that was killing off their bees, is that if you think that you just go down to the Coop or to Home Depot or some other big box store and you buy a jug, if you think that that's safe because it has a label on it, I've worked risk assessment for 20 years now. What I can conclusively tell you, nobody is watching. Nobody is watching. All right? How the hell would you do individual risk assessments on thousands, millions of species for 20,000 registered formulated pesticides in the United States alone? Where does the money come from? The only data that the EPA has either comes from, you know, public sector or research facilities, or from the companies themselves, which is where the majority of the data comes from. That's not saying that we should ban all pesticides. What I'm saying is that folks need to respect these things, that they are having tremendous environmental effects and human health effects on our populations. We know that suicide rates and depression rates in the agricultural community are the highest of any career choice in the United States, and we have statistically linked depression in farmers with pesticide use. Why isn't that front page news? The other conclusion is that agriculture as practiced, not that we're producing food, but how we're producing food, is probably causing us more problems than it's solving. For all of the production, for all of the simplification, are we better off as a society? We're sicker than ever, right? Our environment is deteriorated to the point where sustainable ag no longer makes sense. It has to be regenerative ag. We have to rebuild it. And the last thing that I learned, and it was a humbling experience, is that as the expert, you know, as the scientist, and then you've got the farmers out here, the farmer is an empty vessel that the scientist fills with our knowledge. Right? I had to relearn that because the farmers were so much more experienced and smarter than anything I was doing. And you guys have the answer. You guys have the future. So, what did I do wrong? Why am I no longer with the USDA? Back in 2012, a postdoc and I decided to publish a paper that said that neonicotinoids did not help soybean farmers in South Dakota. That these seed treatments, and that in fact they were probably hurting farmers because they were being charged for something that wasn't controlling insect pests, and they were killing the natural enemies of those pests as well. There was backlash. There was backlash from that study. They tried to stop me from publishing it back then. They criticized it, but then they let it through. And that sort of precipitated, I got my name on a radar screen somewhere or another. But it was my job, right? That was my job. Then in 2015, an undergraduate for his thesis project and I worked on a project very simple that said that neonicotinoids were getting into milkweed in the field and were killing monarch butterflies. Again, not a shocking revelation. The USDA approved that publication to go out for publication, and then after it hit the press, they said they never did, and then they suspended me for it. So that was the first thing I did wrong. I asked the wrong questions about a billion-dollar industry. And then we published a little thing about RNAi. Do you guys know what RNAi is? I gave a talk on it last year in Albany. It's RNA interference. It's a new form of genetic pesticide that's now commercially available. It's in transgenic corn. And what we said was that this form of pesticide is unique. It flips genes off, okay, in a target organism. At least that's the hope. What we found is that it's not as specific as they say. That it could flip off genes in other organisms. Unintended genes that we don't even understand what they're doing sometimes. And what that said, and that precipitated some major backlash at that point. They tried to stop, they took all the teeth out of the bioscience paper, and then they actually, even though we had 7 independent peer reviews on that Peer J paper that finally came out, they said we could not publish it. We couldn't publish it. The USDA didn't want that data to come to light. The last thing that I did that was crazy is I looked at this map and I said, that doesn't make a lot of sense. That there may be some implication of devoting 10% of the terrestrial land surface of our country to 2 plant species, corn and soybeans. And they made me take my name off of that paper. It was already published. It had already been peer-reviewed by all, the scientific process, the scientific system was in place, right? But that wasn't enough. They had to make a point. And every day, I started getting harassed. Every day. They started calling me. Do you have 7 layers of approval in order to submit an abstract for a field day? Right? Did you get all your paperwork in? Oh, you forgot to sign this one. Just everyday harassment for 6-8 months. Then they started harassing the 14 people in my lab, from undergraduates all the way up to postdocs. I mean, you as a scientist, and then as you move up into managerial positions within the bureaucracy, you suddenly are held accountable for so many people, and you don't want those people to suffer. If you publish something, if it's just a matter of squashing one little study in South Dakota, then you're able to preserve everybody else from a potential funding shortage because Congress just cut your budgets. Fear is a powerful motivator, and scared people do bad things. And this was a very bad thing. So I quit, and I quit noisy. Front page of the Washington Post Sunday magazine. Just hit the press, and it prompted the USDA to revisit, at least on paper, what's going on. And ARS did a survey of the scientists, and they found that only 10% of the scientists complained about research suppression for political reasons. Only 10%. Only 10% of 2,000 scientists. That's 200 scientists that had gone through the same BS that I went through and didn't do anything about it. So we revisit this question. How do we make regenerative agriculture mainstream? I tried to change the system from within. I don't believe that it's possible. The change to our food system is already happening. We need to give that the support that it needs. We need to use our science not to maintain the paradigm, but to innovate it. That's what science used to be used for, right? Especially within these public institutions. Ask the risky, hard questions, and there isn't fear of repercussions from those decisions. Education. We need to train the next generation of scientists, certainly, but also farmers, beekeepers, and ranchers in systems thinking, not compartmentalized component research, where every discipline focuses on their little specialization and it's never knitted together into a whole system again. That's what you guys are doing on your ranches every day. You're not working with just the bugs. You're not working with just the cows or the grass. It's all a system. And then finally, scientists used to be brilliant naturalists. They'd go out into the field and they'd sit down and they'd observe the natural world and they'd use those observations to generate hypotheses and high-risk questions that then they would explore using the scientific framework. And now so often the applied sciences are being forgotten. The way you get funded is not because you've got a great applied research project that's going to help innovate our food system. It's because you sat behind your computer, you developed a sexy grant proposal, and everybody up this chain is patting you on the back and saying you did a great job. You did a great job. You got us some money. We need to get the scientists out there and demonstrate regenerative principles. We need the farmers to be practicing what they're preaching. We need the scientists to be practicing what they're preaching. And that is why I quit and started this place. Just north of Brookings, South Dakota, about 25 miles, is Blue Dasher Farm. There we are, right there, the star in eastern South Dakota, just close enough to Minnesota to make it really cool. That's where I grew up. What we had when we started was 3 bare buildings, 25 acres of perennial grass that we had to turn into cropland, and 28 acres of wetlands and unbroken native prairie. The first thing that we did is we had to start a world-class research facility from scratch. And you know how we did it? I sold everything I had. My wife and I sold everything we had, our house, and we put it all of our chips onto the table, and we bought this farm. Crazy. And we reached out to the farmers and the ranchers and the beekeepers around the world and said, if you share our vision, consider giving us a little bit of money that we could get started on this. And we raised enough money from donors all over the planet to start a research facility in regenerative ag through crowdfunding. That's never happened before. Never happened before. But the fact that we are still here after 2 years plus a couple of months is validity that this is a movement that is going on right now. So this is what we started with. This is our research lab. It was a milking parlor, literally a pit, and a dog kennel, where the floors are all sloped down into a little channel for all the dog piss to go down. It was great. And everybody, my students came in, they're like, what the hell did you just do to us? And this is what it is now, filled with life. We've got a greenhouse room, we have a molecular laboratory, we have a desk. I have a desk for the first time in 2 or 3 years. In 2017, I finally got a desk. And we've got just a lot of cutting edge research that's coming out of this place. Claire's study is just one of a dozen studies that we've gotten published since we've started this. Projects pertain to the ecological sustainability or refurbishment of rangelands, diversifying cropland any way we can, and the honeybee issue. We currently have, but if we solve these two things, the honeybees are going to be just fine. We currently have active projects, boots on the ground projects, and students in South Dakota, Alabama, Tennessee, all the way down to California, working on almonds out there. None of this is me. If I had gotten up there and said, John Lungren wants to start something special, nobody in their right mind would have given us a dime, right? This was because we're entirely mission focused. And it has attracted some of the best talent that I mean, people from all over the world end up coming to little Esteline, South Dakota. I mean, we're in the middle of nowhere. To be a part of something bigger. To be a part of something. Deliverables, what have we done so far? Let's see. Yeah, we're getting up there. Our field day this year is August 11th. Please come out. I want this to set a new record for us. We've hosted groups from Russia, South Africa, France. I spoke at the UN Biodiversity Conference. We are now we've presented in 19 states, 3 provinces, 7 countries. We've had thousands of hits on my TEDx talk discussing this. And then we hosted the first agroecology workshop that I know of in Southeast Asia. And that was particularly special. We're doing that again in November, out in New Zealand. Poor me. 7 documentaries have been filmed. We are not just in the fringe, like, you know, I mean, these crazy publications like Acres and Mother Earth and stuff like this. No, we're also getting into, I love those, by the way. And we are in those. But we're also in places, you know, that are mainstream. You know, cover crops and things like this are not so crazy anymore. And we've had 11,000 face-to-face contacts since 2017. And that is what fosters a movement, is relationships, isn't it? All right. The students that are coming out are doing really well. I'm not going to go into that. Here is the actual farm itself. Our goal, financially, net profit is $2,000 per acre in 2018. We made, full confession, I've never been a farmer and I've never been a beekeeper. All of this is new to me, all right? New to us. But so far, we've been able to, using these principles that you guys have told me, we've been able to put those into practice. All of our equipment is new to us. And that's one of the real constraints. I can't change the way that I'm farming because I'm too invested in the equipment that we've got. Guess what? You're not going to have the best equipment if you make this change right away, at least if you're bright. You're going to get the old workhorses that are laying around, and so, but you know what? It gets the job done. And that's what we're after here. Honey production is one of our main revenue streams. We currently have 100 hives. Using those 100 hives, I should be able to get, you know, 6,000 pounds of honey annually off of this farm. It's taken a few years in order to build up our comb, though, because they devote a lot of their honey resources into wax production at first. But I think we're in a really sweet spot in order to make that happen. At $8 a pound, and we cannot keep it in stock. We have some back here, and there's some on the tables out there. So if you guys would like some, you're more than welcome. This was our bees late last summer, and then the first frost hit, and this is our bees. The rest of those died. We built a farm for honey production. We use no insecticide. I use a tidge of herbicide. I use no chemical fertilizers, no fungicides. But you know what? The neighbor sprayed some propiconazole. 2 neighbors down the road use neonics. The county literally came by my farm with a fire hose, spraying down the non-existent thistles in my field margin. What do you do? What do you do? I thought I was a bad beekeeper when I lost 75% of my hives after the first frost, and then the beekeeper said all of their hives in Nebraska died. Tens of thousands. Almost all of the hives in Nebraska. At this point, we're replacing bees in this country. 150% of the beehives in this country are replaced every year. That's not the statistic that's coming out of the USDA at this point, right? If anything, they give you 50%. But what they're ignoring is the fact that queen bees used to live 3 or 4 years. Now they live 6 months. So every time you requeen a hive, that's a brand new hive. The genetics is all new. No bees, no plants, no plants, no people. We grow annual field crops. Weird stuff. I do not sell my crops by the bushel, I sell them by the pound. Why would I grow a crop that has a margin that's this thin? That's dumb. That is a bad business decision. We grow phacelia, we grow borage, we grow hubam, annual sweet clover. These are all high-valued crops that we're selling about $2 to $4 a pound for the seed. But what's more important to me is that these are also some of the top honey-producing plants that are out there. I lost my borage last year. I couldn't figure out how to get it out of the field and into my combine. But I still made more money than the neighbors. How often do you lose an entire crop and still make money? The answer is every single time when you're farming regeneratively. Every time. Because you're stacking revenue streams. Free-range chickens, we've got 115 laying hens. We're developing that market right now. We're selling it to the community at $3.50 to $4 a dozen. Gabby back there is helping a lot with that. My wife was instrumental in getting this thing up and running. We can't keep the eggs in stock, and I wish that chickens would grow faster. We also have a few meat birds, and we'll see where that goes. Hair sheep have been a lot of fun. We have, I'm shooting for 50 ewes on our farm. I think we could support that. These are for meat production. And then the other thing that we're really trying to strive for is eliminating all input costs, and especially chemical input costs. And so I used, for the first time this year, we tried using our sheep to graze our weeds and then plant right in after them. I think this is going to be brilliant. Why would I? So we had a group of farmers out there like, oh, your field's getting a little weedy. I'm like, well, I don't see any weeds. I see forage. We have to see problems as opportunities sometimes. Okay? Right, why would I spend money on something I could make money on? That's dumb. We plant all of our annual crops. I should also say, this is our crop ground, by the way. All of our annual crops are seeded directly into warm season perennial grasses. We've got some really nice blue stem plots out there that we seed into. The pigs have been a joy to have out on the farm. We're following the sheep with the pigs. These are for meat production. We're just practicing with them this year, but they're also controlled disturbance. We have a really stabilized system out there, and I want to disturb it a little bit. You don't hear me talking about disturb your soil very often, but nature is actually designed to have certain disturbance events, and pigs provide that. Plus, we can get rid of any eggs that we can't sell or didn't sell last week and feed them directly into the pigs. Funding, donations. We are competitive for just about every grant program that's out there. Farm revenue is a major component, and that makes us very unique. And then education funds. So I started here as a scientist and a husband and a father, and those are really important aspects of my life. But I wanted to add these things in. What I didn't know is that I'd also have to add all of this stuff. Well, that's a pretty short list. It's a pretty short list. And I've never learned so much so fast. So why? Why on earth would I quit my cushy federal job, put everything on the line, and do this? And the answer is that, at least for me, you know, this planet is facing some serious issues right now. And the status quo is not good enough anymore. We need people with the courage to stand up and do something. My God, there's so many pamphleteers and critics that are out there and just telling everybody, oh, you know what, I'm doing so much. Here's your packet of wildflower seeds to save the bees. We need major changes. We need people that are brave enough to do something. So that's my why. We would not be here without just some fantastic, number one, people in the lab, as well as just sponsors and people that believe that this is the future. So many, many thanks to them. If you would like to see more, we're revamping our websites to try to make our science even easier to get at. So Ecdysis is the nonprofit. You can give your money to the government or you can give it to us. Choose. We take donations. And then Blue Dasher Farm is an LLC. That's the actual farming operation. We're on Facebook. We're on Twitter. Follow us, like us. Facebook tends to be how I get a lot of info, especially when we have new studies come out to the public. So if, that'd be one opportunity for you. And with that, I don't know how much time do I have. Do I have anything? All right. 5 minutes. 5 minutes. We can get 10 questions in. Or, I'm just kidding. Tomorrow we will discuss poop, the insects that love it. So stay tuned.
Okay.
Can you talk loud?
Yeah.
So, okay, go ahead.
We got one.
Tell us what the name of your, is your
Blue Dasher is a cool butterfly, or a dragonfly. Ecdysis means shedding the old skin. It means metamorphosis. And so it seemed meaningful to me. It's also a geeky entomology term, which makes it even better.
What is it, a 501c3? Or?
Yeah, 501c3. Yep. Science and education.
Oh, we got a question in the back. Let me hustle. I don't want to trip.
So when you're putting all of the pesticides, what is the combination there with the herbicides? Like if I'm running around spraying my weeds around the edges of my farm and whatnot with Roundup, and mostly Roundup at our place, but is the connection the same?
Yes. So just because it says an herbicide is designed to kill plants, the reality is that we oftentimes don't know the full implications for other species. Fungicides are more toxic to bees than many insecticides are. So we're starting to document that better. The regulatory process is really poor on that, and so that's a major loophole. The bottom line is, man, we had, the only thing I was spraying on this one field that we were grazing our sheep on last year was, I mean, we had a little glyphosate out there, and it wasn't even a full rate. It was maybe a half or to a third rate. We had a lamb fall down. She had what was ultimately diagnosed as polio, but the causative agent was a mineral deficiency. And you look at what do herbicides do? They bind, at least glyphosate is a chelator of a lot of these micronutrients. And so we were able to help that lamb come through. And then we had to supplement that lamb's mineral in order to get it back, or get the rest of the flock so that we wouldn't experience that again. So these herbicides affect things in complex ways that we do not understand. Altering soil communities, altering symbioses among organisms. And so what I'm saying is not ban everything. What I'm saying is respect this stuff. Don't use it if you don't have to.
Thank you, Dr. Lungren.
Yeah.
What a great talk. Let's give him a round of applause, folks.